The night was quiet, but the silence was heavy. It was not the calm silence of peace, it was the silence of fear. In a small settlement on the edge of the galaxy, a young alien girl sat alone outside her family's home. Her eyes were bright with innocence, her heart still full of dreams. She believed her family loved her. She believed they would protect her forever. But tonight, everything was about to change. Inside the house, whispers filled the dark room. The parents argued in low voices, their faces pale. They spoke of debts, of hunger, of the shadows that demanded payment. The syndicate had come again. They wanted something valuable. They wanted the girl. The father's hand shook as he tried to justify his choice. The mother wept silently, yet she did not stop him. To them, the girl was only one life against the survival of many. In their fear, they convinced themselves it was the only way. They would hand her over, and the family would be safe. The door creaked open. A tall figure entered. Cloaked in black, his eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. He was a collector for the syndicate. His reputation was death. No one dared to refuse. He carried no weapon in sight, but everyone knew he didn't need one. The girl was called inside. Her small steps echoed against the cold floor. She looked at her parents with confusion. She searched for comfort in their eyes, but found only guilt. The cloaked man studied her silently. His gaze was heavy, like a predator examining prey. Without words, he placed a device on the table. It glowed red. It was a marker of ownership. The father pressed his thumb against it. His hand trembled, but he did it anyway. The mother turned her face away. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The girl gasped. She did not understand. What is happening? She asked. Her voice was soft, afraid. No one answered her. The cloaked man grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. She tried to pull away, but her father did not move. Her mother did not save her. In that moment, she realized the truth. She had been sold. The night swallowed her cries as she was dragged outside. The settlement watched in silence. Doors closed, windows shuttered. No one dared to interfere. No one wanted the wrath of the syndicate. The girl's hope shattered with every step. Her family stood frozen, too afraid to follow. But not every eye turned away. In the shadows, a man watched. He was human, scarred by battles of the past. His eyes narrowed as he saw the betrayal unfold. He clenched his fists. He had seen many horrors in his life, but this cut deeper. For in the girl's desperate eyes, he saw something he could not ignore. The cloaked figure pushed the girl into a transport. The doors slammed shut. Engines roared. The ship lifted from the ground, leaving behind only dust and silence. The family stood at the doorway, their faces pale like ghosts. Their choice had saved them, but at what cost? The human remained in the shadows. His mind burned with questions. Why had they done this? Who was she? And why did he feel the need to act? He should have walked away. It was not his fight. Yet deep inside, he knew the image of the betrayed child would not leave him. That night, as the stars shone above, a bond was born, not of blood, but of fate. The girl sold into darkness, and the human, a stranger in the shadows. Their paths had crossed, and destiny had started to weave its dangerous thread. The syndicate thought they had gained another prize. The family thought they had saved themselves. But in truth, something far greater had begun. A fire had been lit in the heart of the human, a fire that would soon burn against the darkness itself. And so the story began, with betrayal, with silence, with shadows, but hidden within that darkness, there was also the first spark of light, a light that would not be easily broken. The transport ship cut through the night sky, leaving behind the broken silence of the settlement. Inside, the young alien girl sat in a corner, her wrists bound by glowing cuffs. The cuffs burned softly against her skin, not enough to wound, but enough to remind her she was no longer free. Her eyes darted around the dim chamber. Cages lined the walls, and inside them sat others. Some were silent, their faces empty. Others whispered broken words, voices heavy with fear. The girl hugged her knees to her chest. She was trembling. She could not understand how her family could give her away so easily. The cloaked collector walked through the chamber, his steps heavy and slow. His presence was like a shadow that swallowed the air. Every captive lowered their gaze as he passed. No one dared to look directly at him. The girl tried to stay small, invisible, but his glowing eyes paused on her. Watching, measuring, she turned her head quickly, pressing her face against her knees. Her heart raced. She felt the cold truth sinking in. She was property now, a thing to be owned, bought, and sold. Hours passed as the ship carried them deeper into space. The girl listened to the whispers of the others. From them she learned fragments of truth. They spoke of a place where light never reached. A prison run by the syndicate. A place where captives were broken, their spirits crushed until nothing remained. When the ship landed, the doors hissed open. A wave of foul air filled the chamber. It smelled of oil, smoke, and something rotten. The captives were herded out, their chains clinking with every step. The girl stumbled as a guard shoved her forward. Her small body was too weak to resist. The compound was massive, built from dark steel and endless walls, towers stretched into the sky, their tops vanishing into clouds of smoke. Lights glowed red across every gate. Watchers stood high above, armed and ready. The ground beneath her feet was blackened, scarred with years of suffering. Inside, the captives were separated. Some sent to labor pits, others to cages. The girl was dragged into a narrow corridor. Her cuffs tightened as if to remind her she could not fight. Finally, she was thrown into a small cell. The door slammed shut with a metallic echo. The walls were damp, the floor cold. A faint light flickered above. She pressed herself against the corner. She felt the weight of the chains, but heavier still was the weight inside her chest. She was alone, abandoned, and powerless. Yet even in the silence of her cell, she could hear faint cries from the others. Some called out names of loved ones. Some begged for freedom. Some no longer spoke at all. Only their breathing remained. Shallow and broken, the cloaked collector passed through the hall once more. His steps stopped outside her cell. The small light flickered over his face, revealing scars carved deep into his skin. He leaned close to the bars. His voice was low, like thunder whispered. "You belong to the syndicate now," he said. "Forget the stars, forget your past. There is only the darkness." His words cut into her like blades. The girl tried to be brave, but tears rolled down her face. She could not answer him. Her throat was tight with fear. The collector's smile was faint, cruel. He turned and walked away. His shadow lingered long after he left, far beyond the compound walls. Hidden in the outer ruins of the city, the human mercenary watched. He had followed the transport ship. His eyes studied the massive fortress. He knew what this place was. He had seen it before. He had even fought against it once, and barely survived. But now, as he looked upon its towers, his jaw tightened. He remembered the girl's face, her terrified eyes as she was dragged away. He could not forget them. Something inside him told him he would not forgive himself if he left her there. The compound was strong, its guards many. Its leaders were ruthless, but the human had lived a life of war. He knew shadows, he knew patience, and he knew that darkness, no matter how deep, could always be cut by even the smallest light. Inside her cell, the girl whispered to herself, words she did not even understand. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was a dream. She wanted to believe that someone would come, that someone would not forget her. She pressed her small hands against the cold floor and closed her eyes. The darkness wrapped around her, but somewhere in the vast night outside, a human heart burned with defiance. The chains of the syndicate were strong, but they had not yet met the will of one man who refused to turn away. And so, while the girl sat in her cage, believing she was lost, her story was only beginning. Darkness had taken her, but it had also awakened something greater. A storm was coming, and the first crack in the chains had already been made. Asterisk. The human mercenary stood on the broken rooftop of a ruined building. His eyes never left the fortress of steel where the girl had been taken. Smoke rose from its towers, red lights blinking like the eyes of monsters. He had followed the ship. Here, and now he waited in the shadows. His name was unknown to most. Some called him a drifter, others a soldier of fortune. To himself, he was simply a man haunted by too many battles. He carried scars not just on his body, but in his heart. For years he had lived by taking jobs, fighting wars for others, and never asking why. But that night, when he saw the betrayal of the girl, something inside him shifted. The fortress was guarded by hundreds. Syndicate soldiers moved in strict patrols. Drones scanned the skies. Watchers stood ready on the towers. Any normal man would walk away. But the human did not move. His mind wrestled with a storm of thoughts. He remembered the offer he had received weeks ago. The syndicate had tried to hire him before. They promised him wealth, weapons, and power if he worked for them. They told him loyalty would be rewarded. But loyalty to monsters was not loyalty at all. It was slavery, now standing in the shadows. He knew the choice was his. He could walk away and forget the girl. He could pretend it was not his fight. That would be the safer path. The smarter path. He had done it before. Many times he had looked away from suffering, telling himself it was survival. But her eyes haunted him, the look of betrayal when her family handed her over. The silent scream as the cloaked man dragged her away. He clenched his fists as the memory burned in his mind. He had seen soldiers fall. He had seen cities burn. But those innocent eyes broke through his walls like nothing else. The human pulled a small device from his belt, a communicator. A voice crackled through, cold and sharp. It was the same syndicate agent who had spoken to him before. "You have a choice," the voice said. "Work with us, and you will live. Rich, fight us, and you will die forgotten." The human said nothing. He stared at the fortress, his jaw tight. His silence angered the voice. "Do not waste your chance. The girl means nothing. She's just a product, a tool. Hand her back too. US, and we will reward you beyond measure." The human finally spoke. His voice was rough, tired, but firm. "I don't care about your rewards," he said. "I care about what's right." The voice on the other end laughed, harsh and mocking. "Right and wrong are illusions in the dark. Only power matters." The device went silent. The human crushed it in his hand, the sparks fading into the night. He had made his choice, inside the fortress. The girl sat quietly in her cell, her eyes swollen from tears. She wondered if anyone in the galaxy even remembered her now. The guards ignored her, passing by without a glance. She felt like a shadow, forgotten and unwanted. But somewhere deep inside, a small flicker of hope remained. She did not know why. But she believed someone had seen her, someone who might come. The human prepared for the impossible. He checked his weapons, a worn rifle, a blade scarred from use, grenades strapped to his belt. None of it seemed enough against an army. But he knew tools were only half the battle. The rest came from will, and his will was burning like fire. He slipped through the ruins, his body moving with practiced silence. Every step was measured, every shadow used as cover. He had done missions like this before, but never for something that mattered this deeply. This time he was not fighting for money, not for survival, but for a life that deserved light. As he crept closer to the compound walls, he thought about the path ahead. He knew he could die. He knew the syndicate would hunt him forever. But he also knew that if he walked away now, he would no longer be a man. He would just be another shadow like them. The night air was heavy, filled with the hum of machines. Guards moved like clockwork, confident in their strength. But they did not know that one man had chosen to stand against them. One man who had nothing left to lose but his soul, in her cell. The girl lifted her head as she heard distant echoes. Somewhere beyond the walls, there was movement. A sound she could not name, but her heart quickened. For the first time since her betrayal, she allowed herself to whisper a single word. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "Please don't leave me." The human pressed his hand against the cold wall of the fortress. His eyes burned with fire. His voice was low. almost a promise to the stars above. "I won't," he whispered, and with that, the choice was made. The human would not walk away. He would fight, even if it meant standing alone against the darkness. The fortress of the Syndicate was built to inspire fear. Its walls were thick, its gates were iron, and its guards were trained to kill without question. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and silence. The captives had no hope, they believed. No one would dare to challenge the Syndicate. But on that night, a single man moved through the shadows. The human mercenary, his eyes sharp, his breath steady. His body blended into the ruins as he crept closer to the outer wall. He had studied the patrols, counted the drones, and waited for the exact moment to strike. The first guard never saw him coming, a swift strike from behind, a silent blade across the throat. The guard collapsed without a sound. The human dragged the body into the dark. His hands steady, he had killed before, but this time each move carried meaning. Each enemy taken down was a step closer to the girl. Inside the cell blocks, the girl sat huddled in her corner. The hours crawled by, her ears caught distant noises, faint thuds that echoed through the halls. She raised her head, her heart racing. Was it another nightmare, or was something happening she dared not believe yet? The human moved deeper into the compound. He placed small charges along the walls. His plan was not just to rescue, but to send a message. The Syndicate thrived on fear. Tonight he would give them fear of their own. Two guards turned a corner and spotted movement. "Who's there?" one barked. Their rifles lifted, but the human was faster. His rifle spat fire. One fell instantly. The other stumbled back before a blade sank into his chest. Silence followed. The alarms had not yet sounded. But tension filled the air. The human pressed forward. His eyes scanned each cell as he passed. Faces looked back at him, hollow and broken. He could not free them all, but tonight he would not leave empty-handed. He reached the wing where the girl was held. Her cell door was locked with heavy steel. She looked up when she saw him, her eyes widened in shock. For a moment she thought he was another captor, but then she saw his face. The same man from the shadows of her home. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why are you here?" "To get you out," he answered simply. His hands worked quickly. Attaching a small device to the lock, sparks flew. The door clicked. The lock snapped open. She hesitated, fear still holding her in place. She had been betrayed once already. Could she trust again? The human knelt down, his voice softer now. "You don't belong here. I'm not leaving without you." Her small hand slowly reached out. He grasped it firmly, pulling her to her feet. For the first time since her capture, she felt a spark of hope, but the reprieve was short. A siren wailed. Red lights flashed across the halls. The fortress roared to life. Guards shouted orders. Heavy boots thundered on metal floors. "They know," the human muttered. He pulled her close. "Stay behind me." Blaster fire erupted as guards poured into the corridor. The human returned fire, each shot precise. His body moved with trained reflexes. He shielded the girl, pushing her behind cover. Explosions shook the walls as the charges he planted earlier began to ignite. The fortress groaned under the sudden chaos. Other captives screamed as doors blew open. Some ran into the halls, desperate for freedom. Others froze in fear. The human could not stop to help them all, but the chain of rebellion had begun. He led the girl through a side passage, every step a fight. Drones swooped from above. He shot them down. Sparks rained across the floor. Guards tried to cut them off, but the explosions scattered them. Smoke filled the air. The girl clung to his arm, her eyes wide. She had never seen such fire, never felt such force. The man fought like he was born for this, yet every glance he gave her carried not coldness, but protection. At last, they reached an exit door. The night air rushed in as the metal frame split apart. The human pushed her outside. The ground shook as another blast ripped through the compound. Behind them, shouts echoed. The rebellion was spreading. Captives broke free. Some armed themselves with stolen weapons. They fought the guards with desperate strength. The fortress that once stood unbroken was now drowning in chaos. The girl looked back, her voice shaking. "You freed them." "Two. Not all," the human said, his tone hard. "But enough. The syndicate will bleed tonight." They ran through the ruins, the fires of the fortress lighting the sky. The girl stumbled, but the human caught her each time. His focus never wavered. When they reached the shadows of the outer city, the human finally slowed. He looked at her, sweat and dust covering his face. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice steady. "They'll come after us. They won't stop." The girl stared at him, her fear mixing with something new. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do this for me?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at her with eyes hardened by years of loss. "Because someone should have done it for me once," he said. The girl did not fully understand, but she felt the weight of his words. She nodded, and for the first time, she believed she was not alone. Back at the fortress, alarms still blared. The syndicate's leaders raged. They had underestimated one man, and now their darkness had been pierced. The rebellion had begun. The fires of the fortress still burned behind them. The sky glowed red, smoke twisting into the stars. The girl clung to the human's hand as they ran through the ruined streets. Her small feet stumbled over broken stones, but he never let her fall. His grip was steady, strong, like an anchor pulling her away from the storm. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound echoed louder than before. The syndicate would not allow this humiliation to go unpunished. Already, distant sirens screamed, and the engines of hunters rumbled in the night. The human slowed only when they reached a half-collapsed building. He pushed her inside, the walls cracked but still standing. Dust rained down as he leaned against the wall, catching his breath. The girl looked up at him, her chest rising and falling fast. "Are we safe?" she whispered. Her voice trembled like a candle flame in the wind. "Not yet," he answered, his eyes scanning the broken windows. "They'll come for us. They always do." She pressed closer to him, shivering. Her cuffs were gone, but the memory of them was still heavy on her skin. She wanted to ask him why he risked everything, why he fought for her, but her voice was too weak to carry the question. The human checked his rifle, the barrel glowing faintly from the fight. He adjusted the blade strapped to his side. Every move was precise, practiced. He had lived like this for years, hunted and hunting. Yet tonight felt different. For the first time, he wasn't running for himself. He was running for someone else. Through the cracks of the broken wall, the girl saw lights moving in the distance, red beams sweeping across the ruins. Shadows of armored figures marched closer. Drones circled above, their metallic hum growing louder. "They're here," she whispered. The human nodded. His jaw tightened. He looked at her, then at the crumbling stairwell that led deeper into the ruins. "We keep moving," he said. His tone was calm but firm. "Stay close to me, always close." They slipped through the ruins, each step careful. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to stay quiet, but the ground betrayed her with every crunch of gravel. The human noticed her fear and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Breathe. Slow," he whispered. "Fear makes noise, calm makes silence." She nodded, copying his movements. Her breaths slowed, her steps lighter. For the first time, she felt like she could move like him. But silence did not last. A drone swept low, its beam cutting through the dark. The human pulled her down behind a pile of debris. His hand pressed against her back, steady and strong. The beam passed inches from their faces. The girl bit her lip to stop a cry. The drone hovered for a moment, then drifted away. The human exhaled. "Close," he muttered. Then he grabbed her hand again, pulling her deeper into the maze of ruins. The city was endless, filled with broken towers and hollow streets. Once it had been alive, now it was only bones. A place where shadows ruled, but to the human, it was cover. It was a battlefield where he had the advantage. The hunters spread out. Their voices echoed through the ruins, harsh and mechanical. "Find them," they barked. "Alive if possible. Dead if necessary." The girl flinched at the sound. Her steps faltered. The human crouched beside her, his eyes level with hers. "Do you trust me?" he asked. His voice low but steady. She hesitated, her memories of betrayal flashing in her mind. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no deceit, only fire. She nodded. "Yes." "Then follow," he said. He led her through a narrow tunnel beneath the rubble. The space was tight, the air filled with dust. She coughed softly, but kept moving. Behind them, footsteps pounded, voices grew closer. At the end of the tunnel, they emerged into an old transport yard. Rusted vehicles lay abandoned, their shells hollow. The human guided her into one of the wrecks. He crouched beside her, rifle ready. The hunters entered the yard moments later. Their red lights swept across the rusted metal. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, but the human pressed a finger to his lips. His calmness was like a shield around her. One hunter passed so close she could hear the hiss of his breath inside the mask. The human waited, his muscles tense. If they looked inside, he would strike. But the hunter kept moving, unaware of the danger behind the shadows. When the patrol finally left, the girl let out a shaky breath. "How do you stay so calm?" she whispered. The human's eyes softened. "Because panic kills faster than bullets," he said. "You learn to hold the fire inside." She thought about his words. She was afraid, but she wanted to be strong. Like him, for the first time, she imagined herself not as a victim, but as someone who could survive. They moved again, slipping from shadow to shadow. The night stretched on, endless and cruel. But with every step, the girl's trust in him grew, and with every glance he gave her, the human felt his resolve harden. The syndicate would not stop. Hunters would come again, but as long as he breathed, he would not let them take her back. Together, they disappeared into the dark ruins. Shadows chasing shadows, but somewhere in the distance, a faint glimmer of light touched the horizon. The flight through shadows had only begun. The night had not ended, but the ruins were no longer silent. The hunters spread through the broken city, their red lights cutting through the dark. The girl and the human had escaped for now, but both knew the syndicate would never stop. The human crouched inside an abandoned station, his rifle across his knees. He listened to the hum of distant engines. His face was calm, but inside his chest a storm brewed. He could run forever, but running would only delay the end. The syndicate had power, soldiers, and fear on their side. If he wanted to protect the girl, hiding was no longer enough. The girl sat across from him, her knees pulled to her chest. She watched him quietly. His body looked strong, but she saw the weight in his eyes. He was planning something, and she was afraid to ask what. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "They'll chase us until we're caught or dead," he said. "So we don't run anymore." The girl's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He leaned closer, his voice steady. "We fight." Her heart skipped. The idea of standing against the syndicate seemed impossible. They were giants, monsters wrapped in shadows. But when she looked at him, she saw no fear, only determination. It gave her a strange kind of courage, a spark she did not know she had. The human pulled out a map scratched on old metal. He pointed to a sector of the city where syndicate supplies were stored. Weapons, power cells, and fuel. "This is their lifeblood," he explained. "If we hit them hard enough, they'll bleed." "But it's just us," she whispered, her voice small. "Not just us," he said. His eyes hardened. "The captives we freed, some of them escaped into the ruins. They're scared, but fear can turn into fire. If they see someone strike back, they'll stand with us." True to his words, by the next night, others appeared. Shadows creeping into the station, men and women who had once been chained, their faces pale but their eyes desperate. They carried stolen blades, broken rifles, and tools turned into weapons. The human stood before them, his voice clear. "The syndicate thinks we are weak. They think fear is enough to break us. Tonight we show them wrong. Tonight we fight not as slaves, but as people who want to live free. The girl watched as the words filled the air. For the first time, she saw hope flicker in the eyes of the captives. The human was no longer just one man. He was a flame, and the flame was spreading. When the night grew darkest, the attack began. The rebels moved like shadows through the ruins. The girl stayed close to the human, her small hands gripping a piece of metal pipe he had given her. She was no fighter, but she refused to be helpless. The first explosion shook the sky. Syndicate patrols stumbled as fire lit the fuel depots. The rebels stormed the supply yards, shouts rising louder than the alarms. The human led the charge, his rifle roaring, his blade flashing. The girl stayed behind cover, her heart racing. She saw him fight, moving like a storm. Every strike was precise, every shot a promise. Guards fell one by one, their confidence shattered by the sudden rebellion. But the syndicate was not unprepared. From the towers, heavy weapons fired. Drones swarmed like angry insects. The rebels cried out as blasts tore through the ruins. The girl froze as a drone spotted her, its beam locked on, charging for fire. Before she could scream, the human appeared, his blade slicing through its core. Sparks rained down. He pulled her close. "Stay down," he ordered. She nodded, her eyes wide. For the first time, she saw him not as just a protector, but as a warrior carrying the weight of them all. The battle raged. Chaos consumed the night. The rebels fought with desperation. Some fell, but others rose to take their place. The syndicate's hold began to crack, and then the fortress doors opened. From within came a new enemy, not a soldier, not a drone, but a creature, a monster bred for war. Its body twisted with metal and flesh, its roar shaking the ruins. The girl's blood ran cold. The rebels faltered, fear striking their hearts. The creature charged, smashing through walls. Its eyes burned with red fire. The human faced it, his breath steady, his grip firm. He had fought many enemies, but none like this. Still, he stepped forward, placing himself between the beast and the girl. The creature lunged. The ground shattered beneath its weight. The human rolled aside, firing shots into its chest. Sparks burst, but the monster barely slowed. It roared again, swinging its massive claws. The girl cried out, "Run!" But the human stood firm. "No," he said, his voice like iron. "If we run, they win." The rebels, inspired by his defiance, surged forward. Their blades and rifles struck the creature. Their shouts filled the air. Together, they pushed back. The human leapt onto the beast, driving his blade deep into its neck. The monster screamed, thrashing wildly, but the rebels held their ground, blows raining down. At last, with one final strike, the beast collapsed, shaking the ruins. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breaths. The girl stared at the fallen creature, her heart racing. She turned to the human, who stood bloodied but unbroken. His eyes burned with fire. "The battle isn't over," he said. "But tonight we proved one thing." The rebels leaned closer, listening. His voice rose, strong and unshaken. "Light will always fight back." The girl's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since her betrayal, she believed it too. The battle for light had begun. The ruins were quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. The fortress still smoked in the distance, its towers scarred, its walls broken. The air smelled of fire and dust. But beneath it all was something new, something that had not existed here for years. The air smelled of freedom. The rebels gathered in the broken streets, faces pale, bodies bruised, yet their eyes were alive. They had fought the impossible and survived. For the first time, they were no longer just prisoners or shadows. They were people who had stood against the syndicate and had not fallen. The girl stood among them, her small figure wrapped in the human's old cloak. Her eyes searched the crowd, but they always returned to him. He stood apart, his rifle across his back, his blade still stained. His face was tired, but his spirit burned like the rising sun. The rebels spoke in hushed voices. Some wept quietly. Others laughed for the first time in years. A few knelt to touch the ground as if it belonged to them again. The human looked at them, then at the girl. He knew this victory was not the end, but it was a beginning. The girl walked to him, her steps slow. She looked at the scars on his arms, the blood that streaked his clothes, and the fire still in his eyes. "You didn't leave me," she whispered, her voice shook. But it carried strength. He knelt down, meeting her gaze. His voice was low, steady. "I told you I wouldn't." Her small hands clutched the cloak tighter. "Why?" she asked again, the question that had burned in her since the night of her betrayal. "Why fight for me when no one else would?" The human was silent for a moment. His eyes drifted to the stars above, then back to her. "Because light should never be sold to darkness," he said. His words were simple, but they struck deep. She blinked back tears, then leaned against him. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest. She was no longer just the girl who had been betrayed. She was someone who had been fought for, someone who mattered. Around them, the rebels looked. To the human, their voices rose. "What now?" one asked. "The syndicate will come again," another whispered. Fear lingered in their words, but so did hope. The human stood tall, his shadow long against the faint glow of dawn. "They will come," he said, "but we will be ready. We are no longer slaves. We are no longer afraid. Tonight we prove they can bleed, and tomorrow we will prove they can fall." The rebels nodded, their courage rising. The girl listened, her heart swelling. The words lit something inside her, a flame that no chains could ever put out. The horizon shifted, the black sky softened, touched with gold. For years the ruins had known only darkness, but now, as the first rays of dawn stretched across the broken city, the shadows retreated. The girl lifted her face to the light. It warmed her skin, and for the first time since her family's betrayal, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but it was real. The human saw it, and though he did not smile, his eyes softened. He had fought countless battles, lost countless things, but that one smile was enough to remind him why he had chosen this path. The rebels began to rebuild, moving rubble, tending wounds. Their voices carried not fear, but determination. They were no longer broken. They had seen that one man's fire could ignite many. The girl stayed close to the human. Every time she looked at him, she felt safer, stronger. "What happens now?" she asked softly. He looked at her, then at the rising sun. "Now," he said, "we build something better. We make sure no one else is ever sold to the dark, and we keep walking, always toward the light." Her small hand slipped into his, and he held it firmly. Their bond was not of blood, but it was stronger than chains. It was a promise. The fortress behind them was still standing, but its power had cracked. The syndicate would not forget this night. They would come again, stronger, angrier. But when they did, they would not find shadows waiting. They would find people ready to fight. The girl squeezed his hand, her eyes still on the horizon. "You're my family now," she whispered. The words caught him off guard. He had carried many titles in his life: soldier, mercenary, drifter, but never that. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he bent down, his voice rough but steady. "And you are mine." The dawn grew brighter, spilling gold across the ruins. The rebels raised their heads, their eyes catching the light. In that moment, they were no longer survivors of darkness. They were witnesses of a new beginning. And so the story of betrayal had turned into a story of hope. The girl once sold to darkness now stood free, guarded by the fire of a human who refused to walk away. Their journey was not over, but the path ahead was no longer only shadows. It was lined with the promise of light. A new dawn had risen.